Hey there, it is time for another monthly reading wrap up for October. I know it's a little late, but what can you do? This was a bit of a slower reading month for me. I only ended up reading 4 books in October, and then I DNF'd 1 book as well, but I didn't read very far into it before I DNF'd it, so it wasn't a ton of extra reading in that DNF for me. I didn't end up finishing any physical books this month, which was really sad. 3 of the books I read were digital, and then I read 1 audiobook. I did put a ton of audiobooks on my November TBR, so I'm hoping to get back into the rhythm of doing audiobooks. I've been kind of in a weird audiobook funk for the past couple of months where they're just like not interesting to me, but I'm hoping to get back into them because I have many projects coming up at the end of the year, like I always do, for setting up my reading journal for next year, which I've already started. And then also I always am working on a bunch of projects for gifts over the holidays. I'm a very crafty person and I always like to make personalized gifts for people. So I always end up having a lot of projects going on over the holidays, but that means prime audiobook season for me. So we'll get into that later when I go over my November TBR. But let's dive right into the books that I finished in October. The first book I ended up finishing in October is Kiss Me Maybe by Gabriella Gamez. This is the second book in the Librarians in Love, I think is what the series is technically called. But it's one of those, disconnected romance series. And this book follows the best friend of the main character in the first book. She works at the library with this girl from the first book, as the series title might suggest, and she has recently identified or come out as an asexual lesbian, and this whole book is about her journey kind of exploring her identity and coming to terms with the nuances in her identity, and developing a relationship with a bartender, their favorite bar that she's always had a crush on. So that's the kind of brief synopsis. I really loved the characters in this one, and I really enjoyed the romance. I do think I wanted a bit more out of a lot of the side characters, but our 2 main characters are pretty solid, and the romance was really cute. I really liked the way that the main character explored her identity in this, and kind of discovered things about herself through developing a relationship with someone else. I thought that was really well done. But my one critique of this is the main plot is that the main character posts a video on social media and it goes viral, and kind of the fallout of that, I guess. And she very weirdly decides to make a scavenger hunt for people to compete to romance her, which is kind of a weird idea just in general. But the way that it was executed, I also didn't really love. I thought that it took up a lot of page space and wasn't actually contributing to the characters or the romance or the plot at all. It was kind of just a thing that was detracting from other things that I would have preferred to spend our time on. So that was my one gripe with this book, was really that I just felt like that plot was taking away so much from everything else that I wanted to read more about in this book. And for that reason, I gave it 3.5 stars. I still liked it, and I'm still going to read the last book in this series, which you already know who it's about by the end, which I'm interested to see how that plays out. But it wasn't my favorite just because of that whole scavenger hunt plot device. I also would definitely not recommend this one if you hate pop culture in your books at all. There's a lot of talk about social media in this book, a lot. So if you hate that in books always, don't read this book. But I don't care too much. It was just the whole scavenger hunt part that I really didn't enjoy, but the rest of the social media stuff was fine for me because I'm not too particular about that. I do think it's a little weird sometimes how authors will write stuff, but it usually isn't too big of an issue for me. Okay, the next book that I ended up finishing in October was The Six Deaths of the Saint by Alix E. Harrow. This is a short story. It is only 30 pages, and I just adored this book. I don't really know how to describe it too much without giving away spoilers. I guess like a very brief synopsis. This is about a young girl who, when she is sick and she thinks that she's about to die, she sees this saint of war come to her, and the saint of war tells her to go with this prince that shows up on the farm that she works on, and she goes with the prince and ends up training to become this really great warrior for the prince and is helping him conquer a bunch of lands around him. And that is pretty much all I can say about this short story without giving spoilers or anything. And I just adored this. I think it was so well done. I'm becoming more and more impressed with shorter works lately, especially if they're really able to pack a punch. And this one was really able to pack a punch. This one unpacks and explores so many different themes in only 30 pages. It's just so masterfully done. Every character feels complex, even though you're only with them for a very short time. And the relationships that develop between them develop very quickly and develop in a lot of different ways, which is really cool for such a short book. And it tackles themes of colonialism and indoctrination and kind of combating those things and deciding who you want to be for yourself instead of just like following the path that others have set for you. So it was really good. I was highlighting a ton throughout this. I probably would have highlighted the whole book if I could, but I was highlighting a ton of quotes throughout this, and I just really, really loved it. This book is, or has, I guess, by this point, also been turned into a full-length novel that just came out in October, The Everlasting by Alix E. Harrow, and that's kind of a adaptation-ish. It's like a rework and turn into a full-length novel of this. So I'm really, really excited to read that now. And I just adored it. I definitely recommend. It's so short, and it's definitely worth the 30 minutes that it takes to read this. So adored. It was a 5-star read for me. It was definitely my favorite read of the month. The next book that I ended up finishing in October was Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker. This is a graphic novel, and it follows a witch and a werewolf who were friends in childhood and then got separated and then have come back together to try and figure out what is causing the animals and the magical forest around their town to act strangely. I had a bit of a hard time with this one. I didn't love it. I think that the art was obviously very gorgeous, and I liked our characters, but I didn't like the plot at all. This plot just felt like nothing. It was super basic and super predictable and didn't have a lot of depth and felt like it didn't need as much page time as we were taking up. And I felt like we didn't get enough character development and characterization to supplement that plot to make the page count worth it either. It felt very drawn out unnecessarily, just to have more art, I guess. But I would have rather had a little bit more characterization in those moments where we're not fully going for the plot, which I felt like we didn't get quite enough of that. I liked a lot of the building blocks, I guess, but I didn't like the whole thing put together. So yeah, it wasn't my favorite graphic novel. I ended up giving it 3 stars. And again, I generally liked the characters. I just wish we had gotten a little bit more development and characterization from them. And then the plot was really dumb to me. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. This is technically YA, so I think that might be a justification for why the plot is a little simpler, but I don't really consider that a justification. I think many YA books have very complex plots, and teenagers can definitely understand complex things. So yeah, that is Mooncakes. And then the last book that I ended up finishing in October was Hungerstone by Dunn. This is a Carmilla reimagining. Pretty much the only thing that is similar to Carmilla is Carmilla and the way that she comes into the main character's life. But the main character is very different from the original. In the original, you know, she's a young girl. She's with her father. This book, our main character is a full-grown woman. She's married and she's been struggling in her marriage, just like having an identity and knowing who she is, and that kind of stuff. And her husband is like, he owns some kind of factory, and they're going out to his ancestral country home to host all of the investors of his factory, and kind of like impress them and try and prove their station in society. So she's kind of planning all of that, but the estate is very run down, and they meet Carmilla in kind of the same way that the main character meets Carmilla in the original. They see her carriage overturned and they bring her back to the estate with them. And from there, you know, vampire things happen. And this book is a lot about exploring the hunger that women have and aren't allowed to have, especially at the time period that this is written in. And I think there's a lot of good horror elements in this. I did really like the changes that were made and the kind of twist on the main character and her being older when she encounters Carmilla for the first time. And I like the ways that vampirism was used in this. It's used very much to explore like different aspects of hunger and desire and wants and things like that. And Lenore, for the most part, our main character, she's kind of like coming to terms with the fact that she does have desires in life that aren't solely revolving around her husband. So I quite enjoyed the character development that she has. She changes quite a lot throughout this book, which I really, really enjoyed. My minor critique of it was, I feel like the way that the themes were explored was pretty interesting and unique, but the themes that were being explored wasn't super unique. I've seen many books explore the themes that are explored in this book, and this book didn't really feel like it had a ton new to say, even though the mechanism used to explore those themes was pretty unique. So I think this could have gone a little deeper in the theme exploration, and kind of the conclusion of all of that exploration. It felt a tinge basic to me in what it was exploring and the conclusions that it came to at the end. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. I know this one has some pretty mixed reviews. I feel like people either really, really love it or really, really hate it. I was more on the enjoyment side, and I ended up giving it 4 stars, and this was the one that I listened to as an audiobook. The other 3 were all digital reads, and I thought that the narrator for this one did a really fantastic job. And then lastly, before we move into my November TBR, I did end up DNFing one book, which was a Victorian Psycho. And I had this on my anticipated releases, like in my reading journal. I write down all of the books that I'm excited for the year. And I had written this one down, and I got about 40% of the way into it. It is a pretty short book. It's under 200 pages, so it's a novella. But I only got like 40% into it, so I didn't even get 100 pages into it. And I just thought that this was dumb. I don't know how else to explain it. I was just like bored the whole time. I didn't care about any of the characters, which our main character is supposed to be unlikable, but I didn't care about anything that she was telling me, and I felt like the book was trying to be really cheeky with the narration style, but it just came off as like, oh, why do I care about any of this? You're like trying to like wink and nudge me like, oh, you know my name now. Oh, you know this now. And I'm like, it's a book. You're supposed to tell me your name. Like the cheekiness was really weird to me in the way that it was done. And I didn't understand it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy any of the plot that was going on. It felt really meh to me. Nothing had happened at the point that I DNF'd. the main character, I guess I didn't ever really give a synopsis for this. The main character is a governess, and she goes to this house to be a governess for these 2 kids. And that is pretty much everything that's happened at the point that I DNF'd. She comes here. She is just observing the dynamics of this family, which seem pretty standard family dynamics. You know, the husband kind of hates his wife. That feels pretty basic family dynamics for the time period. It's something I've definitely seen before. The wife hates the governess because she's afraid that the governess is trying to sleep with her husband. The little brother is a little shit and thinks that he's the king of the world because he's the only son. The older sister is just obsessed with being rich someday. Like, everything was very caricature-y. None of the characters had any depth at the point that I had finished. Even our main character, who I think is supposed to have a lot of quirks and depth about her, because of like who she is and how she experiences the world. But I just didn't care about any of her insights into the family. It didn't feel like I was getting anything interesting. I didn't care about any of the stuff that was going on in all of her flashbacks. She kind of goes and tells you about all these different things that happened to her in the past. And I was like, okay, and pretty much every time she told us anything. So I just was very uninterested in this book, and I'm pretty disappointed. I thought I was really going to enjoy this from the synopsis. Obviously, I put it on my anticipated releases, but I just didn't care about anything. So yeah, I DNF'd that. I am really curious what ends up happening, because people talk about the end of this book being crazy and shocking and wild, and I want to know what happens, but I don't care to read to find out. So who knows? Maybe I'll look up what happens and see, oh, would that have changed my rating? Probably not. Okay, on to my November TBR. Like I mentioned, half of these are audiobooks, so I did 2 physical, 2 digital, and then 4 audio for my TBR, which is a little different than usual. But my 2 books that I'm reading in physical format, the first is Oathbound, which I won't give a synopsis for because it's the 3rd book in a series and I don't want to spoil anything from the first 2 books. But I really want to get to this before the end of the year because I'm really, really excited for it. I love the series. I loved the first 2 books. I especially loved the second book. And I'm really excited to see where the series goes and what happens in this book and where we're going to be left off for the last book. So that is going to be the first book that I'm trying to get through this month. And then the other book is right up here, The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. I love Stephen Graham Jones. I've read 2 other books by him. I've read The Only Good Indians, and then I've read the first book in the Indian Lake trilogy, which is called, let me find it. My Heart is a Chainsaw. There it is. So I've read those 2 and I really enjoyed them, and I've heard such amazing things about this book. And it's one of my most anticipated reads of the year. So I'm definitely going to be reading this month, but I can read you the synopsis for this one. So let's do that real quick. This chilling historical novel is set in the nascent days of the state of Montana, following a Blackfeet Indian named Good Stab as he haunts the fields of the Blackfeet Nation looking for justice. It begins when a diary written in 1912 by a Lutheran pastor is discovered within a wall in 2012. What is unveiled is a slow massacre, a nearly forgotten chain of events that goes back to 217 Blackfeet dead in the snow, told in the transcribed interviews with Good Stab, who shares the narrative of his peculiar and unnaturally long life over a series of confessional visits. This is an American Indian revenge story captured in the vivid voices of the time by one of the new masters of literary horror, Stephen Graham Jones. So I'm super excited for this one. If you're curious, this is a vampire book, so I'm really excited about that. I love just the themes that Stephen Graham Jones explores always, and I really love his writing style too. The Only Good Indians has so many like really striking scenes where the imagery is super strong. And so I'm really excited to read this book. A lot of people that I know have read it and have been like, this is one of the best books I've read all year. So really excited to get to this one this month. And those are my 2 physical books that I'm planning to read in November. And then as for digital books, I did technically already finish one of these by the time I'm recording this, but I'll still just throw it on my TBR and then put, the finished book in my November wrap up. But the first, which is the one I finished, is When the Tides Held the Moon by Venessa, Vida, Kelley. And this is a historical fiction fantasy romance book. But I'll read you the synopsis, since I'll give more of a my explanation in my wrap-up video next month. Benny Caldero's an orphaned Boricua blacksmith in 1910's New York City can't call himself an artist, but the ironwork tank he creates for famed Coney Island playground Luna Park astounds everyone, especially the eccentric sideshow proprietor who commissioned it. Benny's work earns him an invitation to join the show's eclectic crew of performers, his first welcome in the city, and share in their astonishing secret. The tank Benny built is a cage for their newest exhibit, a living, breathing, in-the-flesh merman stolen from the banks of the East River under a gleaming full moon. The merman is more than a mythic marvel, though. Benny comes to know Rio as a clever philosopher, an observant traveler, and a kindred spirit more beautiful and compassionate than any human he's ever met. Despite their different worlds, what begins as a friendship of necessity deepens to love, leading Benny's heart into uncharted waters where he can no longer ignore the agonizing truth of Rio's captivity and his own. A cage is no place for a merman to survive. Though releasing Rio means betraying his new family, bankrupting their home, and losing his soulmate forever, Benny must look within for the courage to do what's right and find a love strong enough to free them both. So that is the first book that I had on my digital TBR for November, and the other book is Year of the Reaping by Makiia Lucier, and let me read you the synopsis for that one. A sickness to kill them, a princess to save them, and a reaper who will stop at nothing to reveal the truth. Young Lord Cassio was destined for death, kidnapped and imprisoned by the enemy 3 years ago. Now he has escaped, the sole survivor of a deadly outbreak that has ravaged the kingdoms of Oliveras and Brissa alike. His survival has won him his freedom, at a cost. Cass is now haunted by the souls of those with unfinished business left in the realm. When Cass finally returns to his home in the mountains, he arrives just in time to celebrate the king and queen's newborn son. But when an assassin interrupts the festivities, Cass finds himself thrust into the dark underpinnings of court life. Nothing is as he remembers, and his only solace is Lena, a royal historian with a penchant for stealing his horse and keeping him anchored to the present, even as the past rises to the surface. For the more Cass learns about the new queen, a former princess of Brissa, an old enemy, the more he is certain she harbors secrets that threaten the one person Cass holds most dear. Lucky for him, the past never forgets, and the secrets of the dead aren't always buried with them. So that is the other book on my digital TBR, and then the other 4 books I'm going to be reading all in audio format. The first book there is from my 25 and 2025. Year of the Reaping was also. So I'm trying to get as close to completing that as I can, even though I 100% for sure will not be reading all 25 of those. I'm trying to read as many of them as possible. This is a nonfiction book. It's a collection of essays about white feminism and, how white feminism hurts everyone, especially BIPOC women and people, but also how white feminism is beholden to patriarchy. So that is the first book on my audio TBR. I've already started it and I'm really enjoying it so far. The next book on my audio TBR is A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandanna. This, I think it's kind of set in the same world as A Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, but isn't really part of the same story or have any of the same characters. But I think it's technically in the same world and has a similar kind of vibe. And I really enjoyed that book and I'm really excited to read this one. It was on my anticipated releases for the year, so let me read you the synopsis for this one. Sarah Swan used to be one of the most powerful witches in Britain. Then she resurrected her great-aunt Jasmine from the very recently dead, lost most of her magic, befriended a semi-villainous talking fox, and was exiled from her guild. Now she, slightly reluctantly and just a bit grumpily, helps Jasmine run an enchanted inn where she deals with her quirky guests' shenanigans, tries to keep said talking fox in check, and longs for the future that seems lost to her. But then she finds out about an old spell that could hold the key to restoring her power. Enter Luke Larson, handsome and icy magical historian, who arrives on a dark winter evening and just might know how to unlock the spell's secrets. Luke has absolutely no interest in getting involved in the madcap goings-ons of the inn, and is definitely not about to let a certain bewitching innkeeper past his walls, so no one is more surprised than he is when he agrees to help Sarah with her spell. Worse, he might actually be thawing. Running an inn, reclaiming lost magic, and staying one step ahead of the Watchful Guild is a lot for anyone, but Sarah Swan is about to discover that she doesn't have to do it alone, and that the weird, wonderful family she's made might be the best magic of all. So very cute, very whimsical, very romancy. Very excited to read that one. Next up on my audio TBR is The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. The synopsis for that one is: a 4-year-old Mi'kmaq girl goes missing from the blueberry fields of Maine, sparking a tragic mystery that haunts the survivors, unravels a community, and will remain unsolved for nearly 50 years. July 1962. A Mi'kmaq family from Nova Scotia arrives in Maine to pick blueberries for the summer. Weeks later, 4-year-old Ruthie, the family's youngest child, vanishes. She is last seen by her 6-year-old brother, Joe, sitting on a favorite rock at the edge of a blueberry field. Joe will remain distraught by his sister's disappearance for years to come. In Maine, a young girl named Norma grows up as the only child of an affluent family. Her father is emotionally distant, her mother frustratingly overprotective. Norma is often troubled by reoccurring dreams and visions that seem more like memories than imagination. As she grows older, Norma slowly comes to realize that there is something her parents aren't telling her. Unwilling to abandon her intuition, she will spend decades trying to uncover this family secret. So that is the third audiobook that I'm planning to read this month. And then the last audiobook on my TBR is Motheater by Linda H. Codega. This was, again, another book on my anticipated releases. I have the audiobook for this one on Libro. I used my credits a while ago to get it, so I figured I might as well read it now. The synopsis for that one is: in this nuanced queer fantasy set among the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia, the last witch of the Ridge must choose sides in a clash between industry and nature. After her best friend dies in a coal mine, Benitha Benny Maddox sacrifices her job, her relationship, and her reputation to uncover what's killing miners on Kyre Mountain. When she finds a half-drowned white woman in a dirty mine slough, Benny takes her in because it's right, but also because she hopes this odd, magnetic stranger can lead her to the proof she needs. Instead, she brings more questions. The woman, called Motheater, can't remember her true name, or how she ended up inside the mountain. She knows only that she's a witch of Appalachia, bound to Tor and Holler, possum and snake, with power in her hands and scripture on her tongue. But the mystery of her fate, her doomed quest to keep industry off Kyre Mountain, and the promises she bent and broke have followed her a century and a half into the future. And now, the choices Motheater and Benny make together could change the face of the town itself. So that is the 8 books that I have on my TBR for the month, and everything that I ended up reading in October. I am also currently in the middle of Slewfoot, which I'm hoping to finish up pretty quickly so I can get on to other things. I'm kind of unsure how I'm feeling about it, so I will leave my full musings to when I actually end up finishing it. Hopefully this is a little bit better of a reading month for me, and I'm able to get back into my audiobooks with all of my projects and everything coming up. But if you made it all the way to the end, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you again soon.